Good morning. We start with Lamatsongkhapa Guru Yoga. From the heart of the Savior of 100 deities of Tushita, on a peak of cloud resembling a clam of extremely white fresh curd, King of Dhamma, omniscient Losandrapa, please come here together with your sons. In the sky before me, on a lion throne, lotus and moon, my perfect pure Guru smiles with delight. Supreme field of merit for my mind of faith, please abide for 100 yawns to spread the teachings. Your holy mind has the intelligence that understands the full extent of objects to be known. Your holy speech with its excellent explanations is an ear ornament for those of good fortune. Your body is radiantly beautiful with glory renowned. To you who are meaningful to see, hear, and remember, I prostrate. Pleasing drinking water, various flowers, fragrant incenses, lice, scented waters, and so forth. Ocean of cloud-like offerings, both actually arranged and mentally emanated. I offer to you the supreme field of merit. Whatever non-virtue of body, speech, and mind, especially those opposite to the three vows that I have collected from beginningless time, I confess each and every one with fervent regret from my heart. You strove for much learning and practice in this degenerate age, and made your freedoms and richnesses meaningful by abandoning the 8 worldly concerns. Savior, we sincerely rejoice in your extensive deeds. Perfect, pure, holy gurus, from the billowing clouds of wisdom and compassion in the sky of Dharmakaya, please let fall a rain of profound and extensive Dharma upon the receptacle of those to be subdued exactly as they need. May whatever virtue I have collected benefit the teachings and all transmigratory beings, and in particular may it cause the essence of perfect pure Losandrapa's teachings to shine forever. Sajibuki Chuji Metok Tramri Rabiji Nidegembadi Sange Jindu Mite Uwa Idrokunamdak Shila Chupashok. By the merits of having offered this mandala to Lama Tsongkhapa and his 2 sons, may I, my family members, and all sentient beings be able to meet, practice, and actualize the teachings of the victorious one, Losandrapa, who had the morality of eminently pure way of life, was courageous in the extensive conduct of the sons of the victorious ones, and accomplished the yoga of 2 stages of supreme bliss and emptiness. Idam Guru Ratna Mandalaka Niryatayami. By the force of having fervently requested in this way, hollow beams of white light are emitted from the hearts of the perfect pure Father and Sons, and combining into one enter my crown. White nectar, the color of milk, flows from the opening of tube of white light, cleansing all my sicknesses, spirit harms, negative karmas, obscurations, and their imprints without exception. My body becomes as pure and clear as crystal. Now we recite 5-line Miktsema 3 times. Migme tsewe tenchen chen rezi, drime gempe wampo champeliang, dupo malu jonze sawenda, kanchen gepe tsungen tsongkapa, losan drape shabla sowade. Migme tsewe tenchen chen rezi, drime gempe wampo champeliang, dupo malu jonze sawenda, kanchen gepe tsungen tsongkapa, losan drape shabla sowade. Migme tsewe tenchen chen rezi, drime gempe wampo jampeliang, dupo malu jonze saweda, kanchen gepe tsungen tsongkapa, losan drape shabla sowade. And a prayer for the swift return of Lama Zopa Rinpoche by His Holiness the Dalai Lama. Fearless teacher and assembly of the children of the victorious ones, Shravakas and Pratyeka Buddhas, victorious Losang father and sons, along with the lineage masters, all the objects of refuge of infinite lands, please bestow the virtue and goodness of accomplishing this prayer here and now, holding and spreading the Muni's precious and complete teachings. Through explanation and practice, you wore the armor of patience that is never discouraged. Incomparable, venerable Guru, to you I make request. While striving single-pointedly for the sake of the victorious one's teachings, the sole gateway through which all benefit and happiness emerge, and for mother living beings, you suddenly departed to peace. What a great loss! Nevertheless, through the undeceiving truth of the blessings of the ocean of the three jewels and the great waves of bodhicitta of the children of the victorious ones, may the smile of a reincarnation swiftly beam in a glory for fortunate disciples.
Sanji Chodang Tsoji Chonum La Changju Bardu Dani Gyabsun Chi Dagi Chushi Jibwan Dagi Rolam Pish Sanjin Drupara Sho Sanji Chodang Tsoji Chonum La Changju Bardu Dani Gyabsun Chi Dagi Chushi Jibwan Dagi Rolam Pish Sanjin Drupara Sho Sanji Chudang Tsogin Chonum La Chanchu Pardu Dani Kyabsun Dagi Chushe Jebanda Dagi Drolambens Sanjin Drupara Sho Kangi Tuzini Zone Tawa Tamje Pambicher Tambichun Dunze Kodam Dela Chance Lo Namo Lai Kedan Lodan Zig Tripondana Mi Kenam the Dro Kunjitanam Sizam Tamji Kedudagi Chuden to good morning everyone. Jesus shoot that is.
동양 양캬레 읍성에.
가디는 녀그시라.
Oh ja, denning ribu mixel sakering is zoba saiki ribu. The Geshe recognizes that today there's going to be problems because Jesus has arrived again.
Nikiu Kosala. Nikiu Kosan is Tangonda.
예, 계란 야포니 구성의 당공.
세면도 콘솔에 니 기부 구성에서 깨지티다.
You need do dantaran 계란에서 단타니 야포쿠기 옆에. or yamana 당공.
당구건다.
So I hope everyone slept well last night. Did you sleep well last night?
Yes. No.
Yes or no?
No.
Mixed.
좋았다. Good. No. No. Sorry. Yeah. Okay. Please. Yeah.
Physically, I feel that I'm rested, but I don't remember what I dreamed about. So I don't know whether it was a good night's sleep, spiritually, mentally. So how do you know if it's a good night if you can't remember what you dreamed about?
Then again, 당공 니 야포쿠기 이놈이나 간다 살고 그래. 그래서 카렌스나 네 단타 네 수포 데포두 히네 네 닐람 데포 야메나 냠파 이놈이나 나 드랭기민도. 데니 밀람 드렌투 둡기 메나 데니 당공 니 야포쿠 둡기 이놈이나 간다 살고 그래.
소소서 하고 그러세요.
It's only you who can know for yourself whether you slept well last night or not.
I'm glad that's true.
Diabodo.
가진 인공의 탭질러인 봐. 탭 단다 다도네 탭질러인 봐. 니쿠야 거리.
Vale.
니쿠야 거리. 니 탭질 원을 러인 가진 러인 봐. 디나와 카르라도스라 디게. 니 마쿠야 겐저로다. gonda penata ningun jabta gonda ani pena black tea coffee too much and then problem sleep and too much drinking water problem sleep and then not good bed dentist bed if too soft and then problem if too hard and then problem that's it then subu niedandro yabu manina nikuya nugres ani samlo manbu shu tang chana jacha jata man nugres
Tama mampo tangna di yang dep nang lola ere.
samlo drama tang de baina
Ere di yang dep nang lola yena yamane kenan ki chokne. So last night I was reading a book or a pamphlet on sleep. And in it said that conditions that prevent one from sleeping well is if one at night drinks black tea or coffee or has too much water to drink, as well as if one's bed isn't just right. If it's either too hard or too soft, all of these external factors will impact the quality of one's sleep, or if one sleeps at all. And an internal factor is if one is ruminating, if one's thoughts are spinning around, that too will prevent or limit the quality of one's sleep. That's all.
Teni da yakshu da sambad lele do shanro. Sambad lele do shani. Nina ni yaga yungo sares. Ni
What's-
yaku kuna inju ni gyurumbu kugweda mudasra. Nangazo do da chuzonga tru manche da tilha and nigio mares. The manche the chuzo ngas something chuzo truth. Ni kuni ni kudem chile ni drogoras.
Gonna do chuta nga druk,
Nga trugorin ya ni kudem chile. Tema chile ni
go
nga
to
ni kusona. Dini ya lana ganji kibudo asra. Ya lana di chi subo kale meju kibu yowa na. Ta ni kuya di ni yabu kuyu bi tagdochi. O nga ni yabu kusha tanda nga yasen na diudo kibudo samnara. Kabkala ni yabu maku di ni sena kale kade yorochi. Dini yungu asra.
What makes a great difference is if in the period before going to bed, one's mind is relaxed, at ease, then one will drift off to sleep easily. And moreover, if one has at least 5 or 6 hours of uninterrupted sleep, then when one wakes up, one is likely to feel well rested. Without having such a period of uninterrupted sleep, then it's likely one is when one gets up, well, it will be difficult to get up, and one will not feel physically or mentally well or comfortable. That's all.
Tekanji 많이 온디. 저단다 산지 그 나눠야. 동할 군지고 참만두와 탐지 자와디 아니 nganzins
Nangzing, Daxin?
nganzin
Gotong. Then the Chatang Yankya Sungukna, Nangcha Nanglola.
동할 탐진 종야게 동할 탐진 종사게 시라오디 nganzins 라온디다 ngan이야고 쿠사마리 삼바이나 니코엘 네고사레스 야자야담바 나직 득사마리 나직 지도 나가 삼상 로드 슉체어 여바나 아니 데니 ngamra 용야 망 라 ngamra 레나 아니 ngamra 레온디 아니 간주 수부 닝 파려디 슉체 로고로 왔어
Gonna the Yanka, the Tamadi
Ngamra.
Yanka?
ngam semla ngamra lewana 아니 닝 쌈파리아 디 슉체 로고로 왔어 닝 쌈파리아 슉체 로바나 아니 차주야 디 슉체 아니 르분 난게 직 롱콤 슉체 로야 딘 로온디 니란식 세로야지 이 차가 열었어
In the Buddha's teachings, when the Buddha taught, he presented that the very basis for the arisal of all our problems is our self-grasping, grasping at ourself, our sense of self-identity. So in this context, it would be experience that you're lying in bed, you're struggling to sleep, and then I am not sleeping well, I am struggling to sleep. And the stronger this grasping at I is, the greater our worry or even anxiety will be about not falling asleep and the problems that will befall us because of this. And then that serves to speed up our mind. And as our mind speeds up, so too do our inner energies. And therefore, we struggle to fall asleep. And this continuity of causes, one leading into the other, starts with the grasping at oneself. That's all.
다들 라만주베 식디 계란 하고 그러
Suksana.
라니 진진 고복군기고 만음 진짜 연된 군지 시스. 하고 마사.
양캐스는
라니 제번 준비 로디 구바스나 차만디고 탐지 싸와레스. 구바스는 다 냠로야. 냠바 구바. 아니 어디 싸와디 소소 진진 숙진 보잖아. 소소 라니 아니 진진게 라니 제번 준비 라니 라야 즉 착삼도도 마서나 아니 숙체 여바나 빌리그레스 신 아니 숨전 탐질이야 집이 로지가 봐나 안 디기 아니 레비차 탐지 연구열이스.
Geshe recited a verse from the Lama Chöpa, which I don't know, but the meaning goes something like this, that the stronger we grasp at ourselves, the more problems that we encounter in our lives. It's really from this, the grasping at ourselves, problems arise, and the stronger we grasp at at ourselves, ever more problems arise. Whereas if we develop a mind that is ever more holding others as dear, ever more aware of the needs of others, and thereby less concerned with ourselves first and foremost, then our mind becomes more at ease and our problems start to lessen. That's all.
소소라야 즉 착신 소소 진진을 로슈치온디 아니 당 까우깔이야 나르겔레기요레 까우깔이야 차도레기요레 까우깔이야 컨트롤레기요레 그래서 참아디 소소 진진치 저용기 딜레기도 하서라 진제번 진바이나 로트스 용고에 균생 거라면도 왔어 로트스 용고에 균생 거라면도 왔어.
So this is perhaps something that we also have experience of, in that when we're grasping at ourselves as dear, so we're putting our needs first and foremost, then afflictions such as anger, such as pride, are much easier to arise. Whereas when we are generally concerned with the welfare of others, then the rise of these afflictions, the potential for the rise of these afflictions is greatly reduced.
아니 장신을 흘러 차가라서 여름지 뒤따도 손대야지 대단원이 인사래서 먼저 가주도게 아니 생기 변한다지 신라야 제수야랑 지야 즉 미지기 저야 우치기야 봐나 안 텔야 제수야랑 지야 아니 텔야 가서 다지 가와곰이야 아니 즉 생기 용된곰이야 되니 다신 동하다는 찌모를 냠 돈하다 다 초도 줘야 들어왔어 다 딘지로 가져서 소수기를 깨토바나 아니 가서다 소수 박배부치 그러 소수 기부치 소수 흘러 차고라서 아니 삼로 당당이는 흘러 차원디 아니 수비기 비기 아니 짜다 롱라서건 저단디하고 흘러신 저거서래서 흰 파야티 찬양분 저거나 아니 수비 차 규당이나 아니 찬양보치 아니 란신기 디차고서래서
To the extent that we hold ourselves as dear, put our needs first and foremost, are particularly concerned with fulfilling our own needs, problems and difficulties will arise in our life because our afflictions will come about so readily. But proportionately, as we turn our focus to being more concerned with the well-being of others, then our mind will become more at ease. And And the way we can develop this is to be aware of the good qualities in others. And when we recognize them, rejoice in their good qualities. And when we see success in the lives of others, rejoice in that. When you see others having, whether it's material abundance or inequalities, when one observes this, look for this. And when one observes it, rejoice genuinely in their success, in both their successes and in their excellent good qualities. And this serves to bring happiness to one's mind. And this will help one's own mind be more at ease. And the more habituated one becomes to thinking in this way genuinely, not merely in a way that's where one is trying to convince oneself or fool oneself, but where it's genuine. And that this way of thinking, looking out for the welfare of others, being concerned for the good well-being of others, and being aware of their good qualities, to the extent that that arises ever more frequently, ever more powerfully, your mind will be happier. Your mind will be more at peace. And this has a direct impact on one's body. And at a subtler level, one's body starts to be more at ease because one's mind is more at ease. There is this natural relationship between the body and mind, that as the mind becomes more at ease, so too does the body at a subtler level too. Lasso.
Diri da nganzu le thangbo ta pena nga da nga tawa midi ani le thangbo wasangi dirwas ro nganzu ta ji nyamnen che ya ani samlo tangsa ani gewi chola ya ta samlo tangi ta ani le thangbo dirwas le thangbo kala ngebar ta tanda ani sem nyumungi ondo mandro ya tabshiti ani pe kechimu chago sares ro ani chi chamba gome ninji gome la soba tzo ani pe kechimu ta dinji gi ani kansam jila ya suzu semla ya rawan tobya ro chi ani suzu semla ya rawan tobya chi samlo kartang na suzu kartang go sam dagrang ga ya ani samlo sha tuya gi ne chi lego res
Kena kona data kyopo kyo song e amsoko mason. Data kena data.
아니 간samjila 수수 샘라야 라만 토비야 지거레스 라 수수 샘라 라만 토몬디 샘라야 가리 삼 거나 디 다랑 샘 삼토야지 미바 칼라 샘 때바는 다랑 때는 데토야기 아니 네세지 레요 요레스 다디 갑둘라 테니 아니 샘 샘라 라만 토비인자 샘 뉴몽기 샤만드 조고요 마레스 Sem Numumbi Shaman the Drogomaka, Sam the Ramant of your was. That D negos when the machine Kun Tebaina, Tigi, Kuntavi, Lodi, Suzu Semlaya, Nugio Mares. Anichi Dechada, Nargeta, Anichi controller software, low, won't curva inaya, and Tipe any Yamnela Jartugak. When Ngaki Yamne Kalaya, and in Deshak Lam to Giros, and his Shadang Lam to Giros. Timjig Nibalegor, then also the Nibat the Meva insa Kazutuki, and Kaya the Insaris. Deshak Kaya, Shadang Kaya, Tado Kayati. Mado di Semla Leondi, and his Sem T. Shawn to Shorcheni, and Sem might give a child as you would ask.
For beginners such as us, and this term beginners, what defines someone as a beginner or not is one's way of thinking, whether that is still at the beginning stages of development or not. So for us beginners, what is of great importance is that we cultivate our familiarity with wholesome minds such as love and compassion in order to counteract the afflictions which may otherwise be very dominant within us. something to recognize within ourselves is whether we have control over our own minds, whether our minds are free or not, whether our minds are under, if we have free will or not, if we have complete control over our minds or not. This is something that we need to be aware of, to investigate and come to recognize for ourselves whether we have free will over our own minds or not. Whether we have free will, put in proper English, whether we have free will or not. In other words, whether we have control over our own mind or not. Okay, that's better English. So if we have free will, it would mean we have complete control over our own mind, and we can direct our mind to wherever it wants, and it will abide there. And that is something that's quite difficult to do, because if we could do that, then something like afflictions would never be able to rise, because we have control over our mind. We could direct our mind to abide with the dominance of, for example, love, and then afflictions we would ensure would never arise. But that's a little difficult. But what we can do is start to gain ever more control over our mind, ever more control over our own mind. And thereby, when thoughts that just naturally arise within us, we can influence and how much impact they have on us. We can reduce their impact. For example, if spontaneously in our mind arises thoughts of the faults of someone else, immediately our mind just suddenly starts criticizing someone. If we have developed some degree of control of our own mind, we can take that thought and transform it into the path, thereby taking this otherwise harmful affliction and transform it into something virtuous. That's the transforming into the path to enlightenment. So right now, we don't have this control over our mind. We don't have this freedom yet, but we can progress towards it. And to the extent that one applies oneself and becomes skilled in this, one will experience ever more happiness. That's what I'm
초보들라 마가와 차기도 왔어. 가서는 교인통이 로디 샤원도 결과인자. 아니 로디 깨운디 수수랑이 배 수수 초보라야 마가와 차기도 왔어. 가서는 샘 비기게 니몽기 샤원도 셔바인자 디그레도 왔어. 배는 잔주 샘바지긴 바나. 로 잔주 샘벽이 심진 신기 교인통디 샤버그 제와기 겨라스. 아까 간다 삼성 그 견통이 로드 때니 콜레 믹스 제와기 되고라서 원수 견통이 로디기 콜레 믹스 제와도 도로고도스 딘디 케바도스 저
where we find ourselves in as beings who are still quite limited in our level of training of our mind, is that when we see the faults in someone, even if it's a dear friend, immediately when we see faults in them, we have a negative reaction towards them. We perhaps become annoyed at them, frustrated at them. And why? Because when we see the faults in, again, someone who's a friend of ours, when we see faults in them, afflictions arise. Bodhisattva, on the other hand, someone who has gained control and influence over their mind, when they see faults in others, their immediate response, due to their training, is compassion arises. When they see a fault in someone else, they recognize that this is an ordinary suffering mother being, and immediately compassion arises. So to the same stimuli, we have a very different response from a bodhisattva. That's all.
딜딘자 맨나가주다 상악치 원내기 상악치 냠린칭인지 바나 견통이 로디기 아니 gyun tongwi lo gyun tongwa teni ani lakbor tsewaji tugu yobana da sanga ga che nyamne china digi yosares modo gyun tongwi lo digi ani kondron dengi yobana ani sanga ga che nyamne cheyagi sansam ro de le khabu pe chi yosares
For those who wanting to assess whether they're ready to engage in the actual practices of secret mantra, you can use this as a guide. How do you respond when faults in others appear to your mind? Does compassion spontaneously arise, or does an afflicted mind, such as anger or criticism towards that person, or deprecation, looking down on them? If compassion spontaneously arises, you're probably suitable to engage in the practices of Tantra. Whereas if you have an afflicted response to someone when their faults appear to your mind, then it will be difficult if you do engage in the practices of secret mantra. It will be difficult for you to make much progress in them at all. That's all.
Tomo lamjang sayati, tomo lamjang, and tomo we lamjang bati, do da nga tomo we lamjang yati, yakbuch mewaina, ani nga ani shebi, nyamlendi chieg shiza yo maris labras ra. Tan tomo we lamdi kares nan do da nga ani shebi, tomo we lamdi, do ni son yore, nga ni pi ta jawa doji chang gyu ni son shabi, niga ni son shabi lamdi kares na, tomba ni topi lo te dang, chanju semi bodres. Tingi gi nyonji yoba na, bena chanju semi tanji shobana chanju semi nyonji yoba na, ani sumjin kandaji gi ro, ani kyen tomi gi topi tela ya mixe gi ani tsewa kiwa di yungu yores. Ta tomba ni 고하지면나 아니 나미 셰비다 라 고미야 르마조라스 라 곰당 르마디 아니 라 고미야
Company talk base set up mena, then
tomba 고면나 tomba 세 고가 약부지면나 아니 라 곰당디 양다바지 연구요 말이스 라 고미야디
Gossam.
Yeah.
Sutra, the teachings of Sutra and Tantra have a lot in common. There are practices common to both Sutra and Tantra. These practices were taught both by Buddha Shakyamuni in the sutras and Buddha Shakyamuni in these aspects of Ajadada in the Tantras. And these will be the trainings related to bodhicitta and cultivating the wisdom that realizes emptiness. So when one has bodhicitta, one's compassion will spontaneously arise when seeing faults in others. And so this is a criteria to get engaged in the practice of Tantra, to successfully engage in the practice of Tantra. And moreover, if one lacks a good understanding of emptiness, one's practice of one's deity practice or deity yoga, this will not be successful without a good understanding of emptiness. That's okay.
당한주 망부지기 상하가 취쉬여라서라 상하가 취 도마시위 갑들이야 네버도 잔주성기 동발랭고에 왔어 라 잔주성기 동발면나 상하가 동발 용한 거래요 말았어 잔주성기 동발 양 타바지 마소나 이 토라야 상하가 아니 동발이 토해요 말았어 다 잔주성기 동발 양 타바지 송야라야 아니 shin socha kanda jigin bayna zawani ya or torong gomoda da bena nganzu samjala ya bena kondrosa jig tamandina tani zone midland dewa chigmen samsamroch le tang sha jero ta dinji gi so simji chig dinji le tang bayna ani susu gyuji chanju seng dombadla ya nugores geldogores.
Before one engages in the teachings of secret mantra, one needs to have received the bodhisattva vows. And one needs to also not just have received them, but be keeping them well prior to then receiving tantric vows. So if we are keeping our bodhisattva vows well or not, we can take our response to a situation such as this. When we are angry with someone, do we have this very common response of, I want nothing to do with them. I don't want to see you. I don't want to have anything to do with you. If so, you're harming your bodhisattva vows. That's all.
The dinza nganzu ra da nganzu gilang kondro yore shadan yore ngarge thagdo yore kadjus kondro seva ina ya a su mijig su kadjus neba keba ina ya ani telaya pa nelen chia di keche gre de ani sosu gyuji chanju sembi dombo sonya di keche gre slawa ina Geshe gyadam sosu gyuji chanju sembi dombo sonya di keche gorada da di shani shen la ya nelen chiga droba ina da di karso da namchuk dama song sirwa
Namchuk dama song?
수수 셰럽 근 담아서 다 오늘이다 로스부 셰럽 남주 영이 진바나 개체주디 죽으러 와서라 셴라 네버 체데 개체레 수수규지 전주선 dombo송에 개체와 레스 라와나 다 미카시기 디 네버 체데 직진은 개체 통쓰기로 와 가서 전주선 dombo데 개체 문 통금 명예 진바나 나 never check the kitchen ton cigarette one the chick churlia 냠nen치 chug nengaji singing bana 아니 찬주스미 동보송에 딜리 개체지다 더 요마라다 딘즈 아니 콘트롤 가주세 봐야냐 아니 순네바 가주스다 봐야냐 수수응원이 자원이니 야와 더 모롱야디 아니 수수기기 동발에 두고 그래서
when you're angry with someone, or when someone is aggressive or angry towards you, there, look at what your response is. Is your response to defend yourself, to retaliate? Or is your response, this is a point of danger. I need to guard my bodhisattva vows. This is important because the common way to respond is to defend oneself, perhaps with aggression or in some other way. But the common response is about me and myself. But the way a bodhisattva or aspirant bodhisattva would respond is to ensure that their bodhisattva vows are kept well, that their bodhisattva vows are not harmed in this situation of great danger. So the bodhisattva, or the aspirant bodhisattva, would see that the great danger here in this situation is to their bodhisattva vows, whereas the ordinary person will see the great danger to their pride, or perhaps a physical attack, something like that. But they will see the great danger to themselves, whereas a skilled practitioner will know there's nothing more important than keeping the bodhisattva vows well, and therefore the danger in that situation is to keeping their vows well. So here, we need to use our intelligence well. We need to have thought about these situations deeply and many times beforehand, so that when we find ourselves in such a situation, we can respond genuinely and skillfully. That's all.
Geshe gyadamba ani 가르 르땅 고촌으로 르땅 두고도서 아
Thus, if, if one has trained well in compassion, whatever arises in one's mind will induce ever more compassion. In other words, one's response will be guided by compassion.
산지 좀 된 뒤에 깨럽세요. 깨럽 나눠야 산지 좀 된 뒤에 그 깨워 찍가려야 아니 루지마땅으로 왔어. 아 루지마땅하다. 제가 인지 침보티 세메와 여반자 아니 고난기 빈게트의 냠도 아니 신나길이야 참로다 거니 신나길이야 참로되기 신나길이야 아니 딱 하고라 자거래 딱 아마질이야 부구용인가 아마치 아니 신나길이야 서로 다 되네 콘솔이야 칼라면이 비기 딱 마우고디 아니 딱 칼라 말한다 싫어지거다 아 강아시 시켜진 칼라 말한 대도 되네 그다좀 전에 그게 세 매비다 인지 총친 코랑 테마타도다 코랑 류디 아니 피길이야 진하게 탑시 제도 이번에 코랑 빙견념도 여반자 아니 제사 라무다다 아니 빙견념도 순나요 아니 빙견 순나는 계시 아니 코칼리 턴로다 고네 코랑 지고 턴로 피길은 좋은디기 아니 딱 눈을 코대온디 딱 두서 담고 그 사금도 하다 루드 사금도 아니 그 탑시 치는 그런게 아니 라반 주도 줄이야 마스 아니 차트주 아니 차트 다주다 안투 차트 다운이다 아니 딱 젤리드 빼마스 방안도 따지 착부도 아 어두스네 아니 두스 담아들래야 딱 먹고 딱 아니 수보다 세도다 다디 아니 세원디 다지 피기들이야 펭귄자 가시 쪼생거니 아니 수수 수보이나 르당 투고라스 다들 르당 투야데 가르스나 해 메비기다 파쇼마 동아데 타는 치마로 냠비로 해 메바지요반자 그
그래지니까 숙부 투기네.
수부테 투야디 콜이야 아니 피기래 닌지 세메바지요반자 닌지 원내기다 좀 많이 비 닌지 지요반자 디도 기든 수수 수부테고네 제투고요라스라 경케 파샨
In Buddha's in Buddha's life stories, so the stories about how he practiced over countless lifetimes to accumulate the qualities that led him to eventually arising in our world as Buddha Shakyamuni. There was one particular life story where he was out walking in the forest with his family, with his loved ones, and they came across a tigress with 9 cubs. And this tigress was emaciated because of hunger, and she had no strength to stand up and to defend her cubs like a tigress usually would. She was worn out because of hunger, and therefore she was close to death. Her cubs therefore would also be close to death. Observing this, great compassion arose within the heart of the being that would go on to become Buddha Shakyamuni. He wanted to give his body to this tigress, but his family were with him, so they would never allow that or enable him to do that. So he said nothing. They continued their walk, they returned home, and he made his excuses, and he snuck back into the forest alone. He returned to the tigress, he offered himself to her, but she was too weak to take his body, to kill him and to eat him. She was even too weak for this. So he cut one of his veins and gave her blood from his arm, so she could lap up his blood Thereby, she regained sufficient strength to be able to start to slowly devour his body. And in this way, the Buddha offered his body to the tigress, and through her to her cubs as well. So the reason he could genuinely make such an offering is because of his incredible compassion. And this compassion is genuine or uncontrived in that it spontaneously arises no matter what the being encounters. And due to, therefore, the power of this compassion, he could offer even his own life. That's what
간지 nganzu mezen naloya ninji somebody shindu kechembu redo asra ninji samba yona ninji samba yabuji yawana ani middle ya lodab legores loitop yes ani shenada ngamra yungyo mares yarum jitsunguda ninji samba kazu shuchembu yawana ani semshu legores Then Kanga Kanda Chabayana, Donlin Chitugres, Nyoda Yombayana, Sobogom Tugres, Bena Nanzo Ra Amagi, Suzu Pulaya, Lemibi, Zevi Togi, and a Pudi Chedu, Kadu Kandas Yanguchon, Yantu Yoras. And the Nanzo Peshanal Peshadi, and Dugbi Pula Zevi machines. Dugbi Pusana put Shindu Tachimbu Ninjibu Puchigyogi Amajibana, and it Puti Chedu Karina Chitugres. And it Megna Chom Goshon, Chom Tugre, Bena Pudi Chutsawana Sayobana, Madi Lamsa, and it put your egg to Chutsawana and Chom Tugres. Kazana could deal logo the Kanilegosna, tell it Zevi of the Legiores.
in our life, reflecting on compassion, cultivating compassion within us, this is so important. So compassion, so just first to say, so translated, compassion, the meaning of it in Buddhism is not how the word is generally used in society. So just to say that, now to continue with what Geshe is saying, when compassion, actual compassion arises within one, it gives one a great strength of mind, a courageous outlook. And this means that one's mind cannot become burnt out. One's mind will never become weakened, dispirited, or feel overwhelmed by suffering. In fact, when genuine compassion arises within one will easily be patient with hardships, easily be patient when difficulties arise. So where perhaps we can see this in society is when a mother's child is in difficulty, she'll always find the energy to be there for her child, to care for her child. And in fact, there's recounted in the texts that because of the love a mother has for her child, that if she sees her child suffering, no matter how awful the situation is, she'll dive right in there to protect or even to rescue her child. If her child were to fall into a large pot of boiling water, the mother would reach in there herself, even though she'd scold herself, to rescue her child. And she would do that without having to go through a process of analysis. She would spontaneously do so because of the power of her compassion. That's all.
Where are you from? Nepal. Looks Tibet. Welcome. 어디래? 간증 안주에 남산집이 추억문이 시에봐있네요. 인지 삼바티 신우는 계신버려서. 아니 소수 무색 돈 싸운다마이나. 아니 제비 삼바티 메타메지렌도 하스라. 제와 약부 지어봐이나. 남은디 참부용 거라서라. 교가디 깨미들이야 제와 약부 지어봐이나. kanga karche ba na ya so kimi de le tang marwas kimi di su joga de zewa ya bu jowa na kanga che ba na sobo gom tu ras ra lamsang ani kaga chegi se di yung marwas ra kaga chaya de kasna zewe gi sem gun dang me ba za kaga cha do ras ra it is
Buddha regularly emphasized in his teachings the great importance of compassion. And compassion is indispensable in all circumstances. So if we take the situation of a family, if even just one of the parties is genuinely a compassionate person, even if only towards their partner, that family will have harmony. So if a husband genuinely loves his wife, has a tender heart towards her and holds her dear, he won't blame her no matter what happens. He won't criticize her no matter what happens. And vice versa. If the wife generally holds her husband as dear, she will be patient with whatever she encounters. And this mind of patience is a mind that is guided by love and compassion, so that whatever she encounters, whatever her husband does, her mind will stay loving and gentle towards him and not get upset. Divorce or separation within a relationship, this follows a lack of genuine compassion. That's all.
re nganzu gi chog namala ya tenders la yara tenders ya de pe maswa kechimbo tenjin dewan jongwa res laundi ten jongwa res ten truba res ten truba ang nganzu de ya ne de ten ne go do chigla chig ten ne go do 아니 기부 용에 대해 지금 된지는 기부 용거를 마도 소소 캐can지는 기부 용에 즉 자원이니 문도 왔으더라.
Here, the incredible teachings on dependence arising are also of great benefit. The dependence arising relates to everything, that things are interdependent. And if we think of then the relationship, one's happiness within a relationship is mutually dependent between those parties. One is not an island on one's own, making one's life happy. One's happiness is dependent on others too. That's all.
dinza 제비 샘도 마기랑기레스라 강라 땐 종사기 땐사 딜이야 제종지 마셔봐나 소소르게 라야 메와스라 먼저
건다?
강라 땐사디 소소 강라 땐사디 디다고야 디제데야 오지 마시나 경 소소라고 알았어라 dinza nganzu기 베나 내가 소소 아니 공예진지만은 dagboya hu jagro asra ne chala jiman suzulo gogu yobana ti dagboya hu jagro ti chola mandro ya ti chigyon chegro ta dipha tundige tenjong ton sangdang wa na nganzu tor oba chi socha kandrajing ba na ya nganzu be ani tor ronji zawani me isares tenjong koadi yak puchi lebana ani sevi semdi gasha gyatama lego sares
This is a topic to think about well, this topic of dependence arising, how our love and compassion arises in dependence on a variety of causes. It is also something that comes about independent on others. It is mutually dependent with a variety of causes. And if we don't think about this well, we will continue to suffer and experience problems. But if we do, then we'll be able to gain mastery over our own mind. So something that we value, we take great care of it. We see it as precious and we protect it. And if we value others, we will care for them, and thereby love and compassion will arise no matter what the circumstance. So this is something to think about well, because this is the process of dependence arising. Independence on caring for others whenever one encounters them, either directly or indirectly, such as through thought, a compassionate, loving attitude for them will arise. That's all.
단다 다저는 디체 동부도 차도르마다 난주 닌지 곰 용디 닌지 곰이 그 간살아야 리니치 거레스 간사치 om부터부 지 om부노부 라 om부노두니 om부노부다 om부터부 Jesus is ombutubo and Chamba is ombunombo. Ombunodu nicheras, rather sorry. Ombunodu nicheras, ombunodu nichonde, ombunobati, riba yagati, and tombani gombi tobgi, ninji kigres, ninji lot kigres. Ombutubati. 당분인지 끼네 디니치수 아니 다 동반용 땡종게 내설티 삼고요레스 어디서 디자 엄부 nombo디게 땡종 임비게 내루트 상원디 땡종 임비 내루트 상원디 아니 라왕기 동바디 또인 거레스 라왕기 동바 또벌 때니 아니 라왕기 트버 메신도 라왕기 초반 준비기 로 안케니 티왕긴 되사기 컨트롤기 나게지 타도기 랭엠바산의 동ар 나르수저라스 덴통온디 다 덴데위 동하다 탄 치마로 냠비기 세와디 아니 동반이 또비기 아니 세위 로틴 쟁고레스 디송요레스라
Geshe is using terms which in English don't work so well, but I'll use the terms and then try and explain the term a little bit and then continue with his presentation. So he says there are two ways to meditate on compassion, and which one is more successful depends on the individual. So there are those of sharper intelligence, such as Jesus, and those of average intelligence, such as Jumper. And so for those of sharper intelligence, there's a particular path to take or method to employ, and those of average intelligence, another path or method to employ. So now to say from the translator side, the way I understand this intelligence, because it's literally sharp intelligence and dull, is whether one is naturally more inclined to analytical meditation and reasoning or not. That's my understanding, but this is not the terminology. The terminology is sharp intelligence, like Jesus, and dull intelligence, like Champa.
Sharp Jesus. Jesus. Yes, Jesus, sorry. Jesus, hand up.
Now everyone knows who Jesus is. So now to talk about these two methods. So those who are of sharper intelligence, or as my understanding is those who are more inclined to analysis and reasoning, they will focus on meditating on emptiness, coming to understand reality. And that then later induces their arisal or their realization of compassion. So their sequence of realization is first emptiness, and that leads to the arisal of compassion. Their understanding of emptiness enables their later a generation of compassion. Whereas the dull practitioner, the more average practitioner, the one that my understanding is not so inclined towards reasoning, they will be drawn more to focusing on compassion and cultivating compassion. And when they realize compassion, then they will want to understand emptiness. So their realization of compassion will lead them or encourage them to need to come to understand reality, to meditate on emptiness. So the difference between these two approaches is the sequence. The one of more average intelligence first relies on compassion, and that leads them to meditate on emptiness. Whereas those of sharp intelligence, they meditate first on emptiness, and that induces their realization of compassion. So to look at the sequence, at the actual meditation in brief for the person of sharper intelligence and more inclined to analysis, is they will reflect well on both emptiness and dependence arising. And they'll come to recognize that how phenomena appear to one's mind and that they are empty of existing in this way, but they do exist as merely dependent on being merely labeled by mind. So in this way, they come to understand the harmony between emptiness and dependence arising. And within this meditation, they will come to understand suffering and the origin of suffering. They'll come to recognize how in dependence on our afflictions, we create contaminated karma, and then in dependence on our afflictions, that contaminated karma ripens into suffering or unwanted experiences. So in this way, they come to recognize through their understanding of emptiness and dependence arising, how we suffer. Then they will, as they come to understand reality through the harmony of emptiness and dependence arising, this will induce compassion, because they'll recognize that this process that has been deluding them, and now they're gaining freedom from because of the understanding of emptiness. This process applies to others, and they are suffering because they are deluded by their ignorance. So in this way, compassion arises, but in dependence on the prior cultivation of the wisdom realizing emptiness and dependence arising. That's okay.
The tenjong se dig tolia soundoundi. Any round tribute tongwati, round mevadi, the Sibu Shujin talk to Goresra, Sibu Shujin. Did the pay kitchen with Sares, Ganzara. Ganzu round go to Samsung Lojera, and I'll round go to Samsung. Ni round talk to Samsung. And meeting and a major round talk to meeting and the top down talk to the Samsung. Tindig and a some of them done any contract, the Shadan Kiela, so Mamushu Yungoras. The one thing on the Tenjong Ton Sound Tawena Nanzolaya Nanzo Rawang Trumeva Nanzo Rawang Trumeva, the Sevu Shuji Tongrovasra. The Rawang Trumeva, any Suzuki on the Rawang Trumeva. The Rawan Mishang talks on Samsung, Lord Kesakaramundastra. Rawan ni Rawan talk to ni Rawan Kung Rawan and Lugu Samsung, Lord Kesakaramundas. Because the key on the Rawan Trio Maras. 10 in John Maravas. Timbadi and Rawan Mevadi Karsana and Domi Gave Yashudi Nanzu Kevala Ramamandas. Nanzu Niman Deliki, Davadineki, and two Deliki Samsung, Tinganzula Ramanchia Mevas. And Nanzu Nevalaya, the machine and a dig in Samsung Jarata, and Kazus de to you, Nanzula Ramat in Mevas. And Nanzu Chialea, Gawa Yomardinia, and Shigo Dasra, Zambali Meganga. And Kini Shidrong is Madu Kini Detung Chia Mevaste. Nanzu Chivala Ramansaw in the Mevas. Dinashing Nanzu Gengo Chala Ramevas. Two soundless Tangvaina. Only some of the Tangi sound on the North Samsung. The younger Sares.
We have a belief that we have free will, that we have control over ourselves, and therefore others also have control over themselves. To express this very literally, We have power over ourselves, complete influence and control over ourselves, as do others. This is in general what we believe. And we hold very strongly to this view that I want to be free. I want to have control over my life. And when we think well about dependence arising, we'll recognize that this is delusional. This is not the case in reality at all. We may be thinking like this, that we have freedom, that we have free will, that we have control over ourselves and others over themselves. But this is a complete delusion. Why and how does the reflection on dependence arising lead one to recognizing these really foundational thoughts that we have as being delusional? Is because things arise dependently. There is everywhere a lack of freedom, a lack of self-control, or self-control means here control over oneself. Lack of freedom, a lack of free will, a lack of control over oneself. And this first perhaps may be easier to recognize in the material world. So the sun has no control over setting or rising, self-control over, and our earth has no control over the ending of a day and the starting of the day. That our day ends comes about not due to the control of something or someone, but because of the passing of the movement of the sun and earth. So it's dependent. It's not independent. So this word I've been translating now as freedom or free will or self-control is also the word for independent. So we long for independence, but we actually, and we believe we have independence and others do. Yeah, this works better in English, independence, but we do not. So for example, when our day coming to an end, this is not something that happens independently, but dependently, dependent on things other to itself, dependent on causes. And then in terms of ourselves, we have no independent choice or control over our length of life. We cannot say, I will live forever, and we cannot say, I will live forever and in good health. We have no control over either of those. And so too with the external world. We may want this beautiful world to always be wonderful and never be destroyed, never come to an end. But that's not something that happens independently or something that there is some control over. Everything comes about independently, dependently, sorry. Everything comes about dependently, one thing upon another. And again, to bring it back to ourselves, no one can independently determine, or to express it differently, no one has the free will to determine this is my lifespan and it will be always one of health and happiness. We cannot determine that. We do not have free will over that or control over that because it doesn't come about independently. It comes about dependently. All results come about dependently. That's what I mean.
Mantas. She mantas.
Me. Yung opinion po. Yun inchike tokla self-persona sig mampo vejo tangkare. Kasi natsu sig tak yomare.
Ani tiwa yona dixaris. Tiwa tayana.
So I've said quite a lot today. Maybe you have some questions, so please do ask. Whatever you ask is fine. Don't hesitate.
I think translator not here. Yes.
I was wondering if, well, you mentioned that there was maybe a difference between how you are talking about compassion and how it's generally used in society. And I was wondering if you could maybe talk about that difference a little bit more.
Sure.
And also, like, I think it was like Lama Yeshe that talked about idiot compassion as well, and all these different types of compassion. And like, how do we know when we're like cultivating like bodhicitta and not one of these other like kinds?
Okay, so the way I'll ask the question is to ask Geshe to explain what compassion means in the Buddhist context. And idiot compassion, I have no idea, but I'll try and get that. I have no idea how to express that, but I'll try and get it across.
Okay.
Okay, but you come back with questions if your question doesn't remain well answered, okay?
Thank you.
Den igen ninchi de dundak selsha nang roknang. Kaneza ngoma kera ninchi ki kola sungdu den nge consola. Nga to inchi tig ninchi se ye de chitsoki dundak dang nang ki dundak loka yare. Kaze chitsoki dundak deni nga to ninchi kiedu nga to loko chungchung yongi yares. De gangla nga to namtok made semcho shuk chempo che togire pena mempa dan mempa menchap sama konso rangshik yap kangel chempo yare kare jene nyamshik pa di tesong konso nepa tongdu ninji kiekire yini nepa sama ropa che togire deni konso gapo yope nepa chikne shen drongi yare deni ninji kenjene shumpa sem shumgiores, sem kyopogyores, rangshigap. Deni di inchi ketogla, di ninji de. Nangcho di ninji mare. Deni morang, chitsoki ninchi gi dundak, nangcho ninchi gi dundak kari, kepa kari de. Deni kerang, nangcho nanglola ninchi gi dundak, de selfse nangrok nang.
Tanangone di the member mambuji ranshi gagores, Kazana never mambu shows Tony, same shoe chad oras. Same shoe chad oras. The D Kaulaya, the ninji nisamna, ninji ki to your samares. Ninji ki to your samares. The ninji ki matu di, ani the netsu dramadan tondi, ani sem shumraj. This sem di shumba ki your mado, Tikalaya ninji ki to your mares. Nisamna din sares, ra.
So in explaining the different usage of compassion in the Buddhist context and the and in our colloquial usage, then I gave Geshe the example that we talked about compassion fatigue, and a primary cause for the widespread problem of suicide amongst medical practitioners is that their patients they can't help their patients, and they have compassion for their patients. And because their patients that they care for keep dying, then this leads to their mind becoming quite depressed, and they take their life. So this, through analysis or through studies, is seen as a major reason, and there are others, but a major reason for suicide amongst medical practitioners. So I gave that example of how compassion is used in society. So Geshe, now to come to what Geshe just said, is that in those instances, medical practitioners are not giving rise to compassion as understood by Buddhism. And why is that? Because compassion gives great courage and strength to the practitioner, to the person in whom compassion has arisen. Whereas here what we see is that the person's mind is becoming depressed or weak or dispirited. They're feeling helpless and powerless. That is not the result of compassion. So therefore, compassion has, as it's understood in Buddhism, has not arisen within them.
단다다 난추 그 닌지 시온디 그러 난춘 sombi 닌지티 다 지나하고 다 로질이야 샘질이야 샤고라스 다 샘생이디 아니 로다 샘 시바생이디 아니 율질이야 뜨니 샤고거레스 율라 뜨니 샤고거레스 다 율디야 우유네 술질이야 우유네 술질이야 뜨니 게샤비 로이 리치 샤고레스 당우유네스 가르레스 라운디 우유네술이야 간주 속차용 상물로야 대원 대바다 동물 문제바디 아니 여바디 우유레스 미칸 속차 간다지나야 동물 되고요 말레스 동물 되고 메바디 우유로와스 동물 문제인 시글이야 동물 레온디 티 동화다타는 치마로 냠야디 우유네스는 tum비게 상물지레와스 라 dirda nanchuni shebi ninji di teres nguyu ne sulaya dungar mendenge je dewan denge jilaya dungar tegi yobana ti dunga datana chimaro nyambi lodi nanchuni shebi ninji di teres
When the tick chicken gomasong che marung
la
che marung
chimaro
che marung
di taro chena samsam rach ti dunga da taro chena samsam dirlawa da chimaro sana dirlawa.
The meaning, so look at the meaning of compassion in Buddhism. So firstly, compassion, we should understand that it's a mind, and it's a mind that needs to, and every mind we know has an object. In other words, something it is thinking about, something it is holding. So this mind needs to be relating to whatever it is thinking about in a manner that is in accordance with reality. So it needs to be a mind of intelligence. A mind of ignorance is relating to things in a way that is not in accordance with reality. But the mind of compassion needs to be relating to how things really are. So what is the reality being referenced here? And that is that all sentient beings, whomever they are, want to abide in lasting, stable happiness. No one wants to suffer. No one wants the slightest problem or difficulty in their life. No one. We all want to abide in happiness. But despite wanting to abide in lasting happiness, freed of problems, beings continue to suffer. They continue to encounter problems and difficulties. And this is unwanted. No one wants this, but beings continue to meet problem upon problem upon problem. And compassion arises then through understanding that this is the actual situation for beings, that this is the real situation, and this is unacceptable. This is really unacceptable. So this leads to the arisal of compassion. So this mind of compassion is a mind of intelligence that understands how things actually are. That's all.
당한수 지조 나로게 닌지디 까고라 디 케투고요 말아스 지조가 난게 닌지디라야 랑 소소게 아니 가사진 비차네 아니 닌지케야 세와케야다 안직 소소던 제와요바 찬 마도 오늘 표기게 닌지케사 율디 그 동안 되고 매봐 대원 되고 여바질이야 콜 동화 용구 여바 준선진 그 동안 같은 찌마로냐 로 디키 투요 말와스 디키 투바나 가두이나 아니 인지 덜쓰고 말했어 간스나
Ik also nato gapo yosa michik also gapo yosa 공강을 여두 ninji 계기열에 이니디 ninji 말에 가능해서 차창단 축바 동기어 말에 디에나
말에 된지도지 말했다 나도 수수
가보
저보인 뭐 준선의 전에 ninji 계바나 ninji 계바는 ninji디 템부 말했어 다 준선 셴바지 돈을 저보 많이 받잖아 ninji들 라사레스
네.
다 피기디 닌지 계산디 동한 되고매봤다. 대원 되고여봐. 동한 되고매봐. 딘디치래야 동한 용구여봐나. 다테 동한테 전에 찌마로 그 동한 싸우니 되고 말쌈비 로 딘디치 끼에도와나. 티 가드는 겨르고 말했어.
Die Tamadekana. Also, Semchen Sama, Dugnil, de Kidope Yomade, also die Kola Samgi Yomade.
동한 되고여 말아왔어. 먼저 대원 되고여러왔어. 다 동한 되고 매봐질래야 동한 리고여봐나. 다들 동한 리고 다들 동한테 전나 자로 채나 냠비 로지 깨봐나. 대는 인지 세고래서. 간 제 인지 딘디지 깨도와나 디 인지도 가두나 대그랬어. 겨르고 말했어.
The way compassion, the word compassion is, or the situations that compassion arises in society, on one hand may sound similar. Let's say a loved one is experiencing a problem. A compassion will arise for them because one oneself won't want them to be suffering. But where this differentiates from the Buddhist understanding is the basis for the arisal of compassion, which is seeing all beings as equal in wanting to be to abide in happiness, freed from suffering, and maybe you can express it like this: having that is their right, that is suitable, that they abide free from suffering. That this is wanted from your side, wanted that all beings do so. This basis of equanimity, this is absent. So therefore, when our compassion arises towards someone, it is towards someone that we feel as part of our group. So we relate to them in a particular way that makes them part of our group. It could be a loved one, but it could be someone who we identify with on a national level, for example, and that, as opposed to others. So therefore, this basis for compassion of equality or equanimity, this is missing. Moreover, what's also missing is that use of intelligence that led one to understand the equality of beings at this fundamental level of all wanting, and maybe you could, but deserving is an awful word, but all wanting happiness, and that being something they're right, but they keep suffering. Because when we direct compassion towards someone, that compassion is not stable. The Buddhist understanding of compassion is this is a stable mind. Whereas because our compassion tends to be directed towards those that we feel an affinity towards, if that relationship changes radically, compassion is not likely to arise for them, certainly not to the same degree as before. So therefore, we can recognize that the kind of compassion that is referred to in society is not at all the same as is understood from the Buddhist perspective. That's all.
Thank you.
Oh, this is us. Yeah, thank you, everyone. Thank you.
Final loving dedication in a small booklet, page 14. From my two types of merits, vasa space that I have amassed from working with effort at this practice for a grand length of time, may I become the chief leading Buddha for all those whose minds' wisdom eye is blinded by ignorance. Even if I do not reach this state, may I be held in your loving compassion for all life's Manjushri. May I find the best of complete graded paths of the teachings, and may I please all the Buddhas by my practice. Using skillful means but strong of compassion, may I clear the darkness from the minds of all beings with the points of the path as I have discerned them. May I uphold the Buddha's teachings for a very long time. With my heart going out with great compassion, in whatever direction the most precious teachings have not yet spread or once spread have declined, may I reveal this treasure of happiness and aid. May the minds of those who wish for liberation be grounded boundless peace, and the Buddha's deeds be nourished for a long time. By even this graded path to enlightenment completed, due to the wondrous virtuous conduct of the Buddhas and their sons. May all human and non-human beings who eliminate adversity and create conducive conditions for practicing the excellent paths never be parted in any of their lives from the purest path praised by the Buddhas. Whenever someone makes effort to act in accordance with the tenfold Mahayana virtues practices, may he always be assisted by the mighty ones, and may oceans of prosperity spread everywhere. Thank you.